Hello, Jennifer.
Hi.
Welcome back for another night of torture.
Hi,
Hello.
Dr. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm here.
I know I feel the same way. It's been one of those days.
Yeah.
You've got to go sit down. Bye.
I'm having technical difficulties. Let's see if I can get it back.
No? Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
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 Very good. Well, it is 6:30 on the dot. I don't want to keep you too long tonight, although I know that this is the most entertainment you will have for the evening. Well, it's certainly better than watching the news. Okay. Tonight, we're going to do what we did last night, so let's mute. And tonight, we're going to be talking about lesson planning. Now, I know that this is something that you have covered in many of your classes, but lesson planning is going to be the linchpin for the first of the commentaries, the planning commentary. And so it's important that you make sure that you focus on the right elements when you do your lesson planning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And just as last night, I will give you opportunities to ask questions. And if you noticed, I did put last night's session on the PLN on our PAST page. So you can go back and you'll be able to review that. This one will go up again tomorrow morning as well. Okay. There are three aspects to planning. The first one is assessment. The teacher understands and uses multiple methods of assessment to engage learners in their own growth, to monitor learner progress, and to guide the teachers and learners' decision-making. Now, why does this come first? The answer is because before you can plan for instruction, you need to find out where your students are. And so we strongly recommend that you give a pre-assessment to your student. What does the student already know, and what can the student already do? Also, when you get to task 3 and you have to provide evidence of student learning, it is good to have both a pre-assessment and a post-assessment. They can even be the same assessment. That gives you some evidence for the growth, the learning of your student. So we begin with assessment before we even start our planning. What does the student know? How does the student fulfill the tasks, fulfill the objectives? And then we can move from there. One of the important reasons we do pre-assessments is because we don't want to teach students what they already know on the one hand. On the other hand, we don't want to move forward with a lesson for which they are not ready. Next comes the planning for instruction. The teacher plans instruction that supports every student in meeting rigorous learning goals by drawing upon knowledge of content areas, curriculum, cross-disciplinary skills, and pedagogy, as well as knowledge of learners and the community context. So this is the planning part, and in the planning, you are first going to create learning goals. Finally, you're going to create instructional strategies. The teacher understands and uses a variety of instructional strategies to encourage learners to develop deep understanding of content areas and their connections, and to build skills to apply knowledge in meaningful ways. Now, you need to plan before you create your strategies. In other words, you don't say, gee, I have a really good activity, let's plan around it. You want to plan around the learning goals of the curriculum for your student. And that is very true with EdTPA. Instructional methods. Methods are used by teachers to create learning environments and to specify the nature of the activity in which the teacher and learner will be involved during the lesson. So we're going to take a look at these models that you see in the chart, okay? Direct instruction, indirect instruction, experiential learning, independent study, and interactive instruction. Now understand that there is a need for all 5 of these kinds of methods in a good lesson plan. Not necessarily all the time, but using only one strategy is not differentiation. And especially when we're dealing with special education, we need to use a variety of strategies in a variety of ways to engage our students in learning. Active learner participation. Capable instructors are aware of the principle of active learner participation. Given the choice between 2 techniques, choose the one involving the learners in the most active participation. Below is a sample of techniques categorized according to participant involvement. Low involvement, lecture. Do not lecture for more than 10 or 15 minutes in a 45-minute period. Otherwise, you will lose your students. Panel discussion, demonstration, computer-based drills and computer-based tutorials, Socratic dialogue, and tutorials. These are all very low involvement because really the teacher is the most active participant in these kinds of lessons. Medium involvement, group discussion, behavior modeling, observation, reflective practice, blogs, journals, etc., asynchronous online forums, email and newsletters, audio video conferencing, and 3D interactive learning activities. So these are good and will help to engage the students. However, the high involvement activities are those that really keep your students engaged. Role play, debates, case studies, simulations, web quests, internet searches, that includes, by the way, research, concept mapping. I'm not going to read all of these, but you get the idea. Structured experiences, problem-based learning, project-based learning, collaborative learning, inquiry learning. Remember, the key to all of this is very simple. Teachers are no longer the sage on the stage. You've probably heard this. Teachers need to be the guide on the side. And EdTPA is looking for that focus. Remember, their biggest interest is in whether or not the student has learned, not necessarily how well you give a lecture. So EdTPA is looking for these techniques. The constructivist classroom allows students to focus on learning through problems. Students ask questions and consider solutions. Students are assessed through projects, portfolios, and presentations. Students apply general skill-based solving problems with critical thinking and research. Students work collaboratively more than individually. From philosophy to strategy. Now, all of these are not only good because they are active, but They make use of the natural tendencies of adolescent students. Adolescent students do things in groups. They are very conscious of their fellows, and many of them prefer to do things together. I don't know if you've been in schools or if you remember any of this, but once you get to middle school, when one girl decides she needs to go to the bathroom, all of her friends decide they need to go too. And so it becomes a social event. Everything for adolescent students has the potential to be a social event. And so group work, focusing on projects, on presentations, on research, these are things that they will do naturally together. Designing instruction, planning with technology. Determining the relative advantage, why use technology? Planning assessments, what are appropriate assessment strategies? Planning instruction, what are appropriate integration strategies? Logistics, how do I prepare the classroom environment and instructional materials? Finally, evaluating and revising integrating strategies. How do I know it's working? These are all very important. Aside from the first three, which we've talked about a little bit, logistics, I would mention to you that if you have not been in a classroom, you need to make sure that the technology that you're using is working. You need to make sure that if you're showing a video or a clip, that you have seen the whole thing first. There is nothing worse than spending the first 15 minutes of class trying to get the whiteboard to work. And the second piece is always have a backup. Make sure that you have something that is not dependent on technology for those times when the technology will not work. Students learn better and remember more when they are actively involved in their learning. We know developing a student-centered classroom can take time. There are some effective methods that teachers use to establish and maintain student-centered classrooms. Characteristics of student-centered learning. Reliance on active rather than passive learning. Important. Emphasis on deep learning and understanding. Notice how this is different from simply taking notes and memorizing so you can pass a test. That is not deep learning. Increased responsibility and accountability on the part of the student. Increased sense of autonomy in the learner. Interdependence between the teacher and the learner. Mutual respect within the teacher-learner relationship. Reflexive approach to the teaching and learning process on the part of both the teacher and the learner. So rather than this necessity of a power differential, the learner and the teacher become partners in the student's education, and learners need to take responsibility for their own learning in some way. Most of the time, students will like being able to do that because it allows them choices about how they want to learn, about what aspects of something they would like to research. How do their interests meld into your curriculum? Remember, 21st century classrooms are global classrooms. Race, gender, class, and culture along with specific learning needs, must be acknowledged. This is also very important. We are no longer just dealing with people in our own towns, but we are learning to think globally because we are now a global information society. Just a brief note, one of the things I've been doing today is working with doctoral students who are giving their dissertation presentation. Now, that would seem normal for someone like me who does this, works in a university. But what I will tell you is I'm doing it for the University of the West Indies, and all of the students whose presentations I saw today are either on Grenada, Barbados, or Trinidad and Tobago. That is how global classrooms work. And that is the future of education. And no, I don't get a free trip to the Caribbean as part of the deal, although I did ask. Ideas for lessons plans can be a good starting point when related to meeting standards. Lesson plans require more detailed thinking and should be explicitly written to plan for all components of the lesson that will be taught. Correctly using an acceptable lesson plan template demonstrates knowledge of pedagogy, methods, and curriculum. This is evidence your ideas can transform into well-planned methods and outcomes for the learners. What should you not do in your lesson plan? Do not assign things like read the chapter silently, complete the worksheet, do the problems, write a paragraph, because ideas are not plans. Effective teachers know the content, understand the development of the student, value the diversity of students within the class, plan strategic lessons using research-based practices, use multiple assessments to evaluate progress, create a suitable learning environment, adapt and modify instruction. I had a wonderful friend who used to say, adjust we must, and that is one of the hallmarks of education. Use effective communication. Collaborate with all members of the learning community. Engage in sustained professional growth. Effective plans will provide students with meaningful learning experiences, connect to related learning opportunities, apply strategies that focus on best practice and research, incorporate strategies that foster interest and progress. Please notice how all of this in different language are focus issues for EdTPA. This is what they are looking for. So what we are doing tonight is talking about the lesson plan as your foundation for your EdTPA. The more planning you do, the better planning you do, the easier the EdTPA is going to be to complete. What does poor planning look like? Frustration for the teacher and the student. Aimless wandering. Unmet objectives. No connections to prior learning. Poor planning is disorganized. You may not have your needed materials. It is poor management, and ultimately, the cardinal sin of teaching, it is a waste of instructional time. So, what are the elements then of a complete lesson? So there are 10. Objectives. What specifically do you want the student to be able to do? Now, this is different from a learning goal. The learning goal says the student will learn about the important battles of the Civil War. The objective would be the student will be able to draw a map of the Battle of Bull Run showing the positions of the Union and Confederate armies with 90% accuracy on a test. It is specific, it is doable, and it can be assessed. That's different than saying students will be able to explain the Battle of Bull Run. Well, what does that mean? What are you actually asking a student to do? It's not specific enough. Pre-assessment, we talked about that earlier. Materials, what are you going to use? Remember, you're going to have to put blank copies of your materials in with your planning commentary. So this is important. Introduction, modeling, guided practice, independent practice. In the rubrics for EdTPA, you move to a higher score if you can show evidence of your student independently meeting the objectives after guided practice and modeling is finished. 8 is assessment, 9, closure, and 10, how do we apply this? It is so important to provide relevance to your students. I don't know how many of you teach math. You can tell me when I open it up for questions, but one of the questions that students ask in math, they also ask it in history, which is one of my subjects that I teach. Why are we studying this? What does this mean to me today? If we can provide them with relevance, they will be much more engaged in what they are doing. Objectives, we just mentioned that, are written with a verb, describe precisely what the student will accomplish, and may define the accuracy expected, are directly aligned to standards and assessment. Let the students know your objectives, why they need to know it, and how they will use the learning. Good objective. Students will be able to illustrate clouds that signal unsettled weather. Poor objective. Students will understand that some clouds signal the approach of poor weather conditions. Pre-assessment, we talked about this. What do students already know? Based on student interest, what would students like to learn? What are the central questions that need to be answered? What prior knowledge is necessary? Materials, envision your needs, consider technology options, list all resources for you and the students, have enough materials and manipulatives when needed for groups or individuals. Introduction or anticipatory set. attract the attention of the students, spark interest in the topic, motivate learners, set the tone for the lesson connected to the objective, a question, a story, a saying, an activity, a discussion starter. I know one history teacher who uses a cartoon to start his discussions of a particular historical event. The cartoon is usually controversial and usually from the time period of the event that the teacher is discussing. Modeling sets up a step-by-step plan, provides a quick review of previous learning, demonstrates specific activities to assist students in developing the new knowledge, provides modeling of a new skill. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I hear, I see, we do, I do. Guided and independent practice. Guided practice is teacher-controlled. Use a variety of questioning strategies to determine the level of understanding. Students work, share, and discuss learning. Independent practice. This is practice that should be differentiated. Students demonstrate learning process, provide multiple learning activities, and build on success. Learning activities, we mentioned some of these before. Graphic organizers, creative play, peer presenting, performances, role-playing, debates, game making, and projects. Closure, lesson wrap-up. Leave students with an imprint of what the lesson covered. Students summarize the major concepts. Students may write in journals or agendas. Teacher recaps the main points. Teacher sets the stage for the next phase of learning. Teaching and learning are reciprocal processes. Assessment. Classroom assessment is the process usually conducted by teachers of designing, collecting, interpreting, and applying information about student learning and attainment to make educational decisions. There are 4 interrelated steps to classroom assessment. Define the purposes. Is it diagnostic, formative, or summative? Measure student learning or attainment. Tests, surveys, observations, interviews, measure against academic goals. Evaluate the measurement data and make judgments and interpret the measurement data to determine if students have certain strengths or limitations. Use the data to guide instruction, render grades, or help students with any particular learning deficiencies or barriers. So remember, assessment is as much for you as it is for the student. By the way, none of this necessarily has to be very complicated. An entrance ticket or an exit ticket is a fine formative assessment that will give you a really good understanding of what the students are taking away from the lesson. Diagnostic assessment. These are assessments prior to instruction, and this allows students to adjust the curriculum to meet pupils' unique needs. Usually these would be standardized tests. Formative assessment reflects the needs and programs of students, usually not graded. These provide information to guide teachers as they make instructional decisions. Summative assessments evaluate student learning at the end of a term, chapter, semester, or year. High-stakes testing is also a form of summative assessment. It is also diagnostic as well. Key elements of formative assessment: identification by teachers and learners of learning goals, intentions or outcomes, and criteria for achieving these. Rich conversations between teachers and students that continually build and go deeper. The provision of effective, timely feedback to enable students to advance their learning. The active involvement of students in their own learning. Teachers responding to identified learning needs and strengths by modifying their teaching approach. Formative assessment, instructional strategies. We're not going to read all of this, but criteria and goal setting. Observation. Now, observation is going to be important for EdTPA. I would remind you that you should keep a notebook of your observations of your EdTPA student. Number one, it can be submitted as evidence of student learning. And number two, something may happen that you want to refer to later, and this will help you know exactly when this thing happened and where you might find it on your video. Questioning strategies, self and peer assessment, and student record keeping. In other words, student will keep a portfolio and record of their own work. I've even seen students present their work to parents at parent-teacher-student conferences. These are student-centered assessments, portfolios, projects, presentations, and we've been through this list a little bit before. This is the depth of knowledge determined by the assessment task. The chart organizes verbs commonly associated with tasks in each of the knowledge levels. Depth of knowledge was created by Norman Webb from the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. Level 1, memorization, recall of a fact, information, or procedure. Level 2, use information or conceptual knowledge 2 or more steps. Level 3 requires reasoning. Level 4 requires an investigation, thinking, and multiple conditions of the problem. Teachers can compile student responses to find out which students are missing achievement targets and how. Are all of my students making the same kind of error? Do their mistakes show that they don't have the background knowledge they need to understand this new content? Could my students demonstrate understanding if the question format were changed? Assessment cautions. Don't assess quantity and presentation over quality. Don't get overwhelmed with grading. Instead, tell students how to improve. Don't compare students with each other. Instead, praise improvements. Reflection. I used to do this in the car on the way home from school. I had a bit of a commute. What went well in the lesson? What problems did I experience? Are there things I could have done differently? How can I build on this lesson to make future lessons successful? GCU encourages the use of lesson plan templates. Below, please find a link to the official GCU template. You should be able to get that on the PLN as well. Please note, there is no official EdTPA lesson plan template. So we recommend using the one below. Okay. I am, here we go. Let's open it up now. I appreciate your patience. Go ahead and unmute yourselves, and I will be happy to take any questions that you have. Any questions?
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, you stated that we, during observation, we need to keep a notebook of, what the student is learning or whatever. You said, do we need to submit that notebook to EdTPA as well?
You know what? You don't have to, but it is evidence of student learning, so I would.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be like journal size, just a basic understanding of what you accomplished during that particular lesson, what did the student do, etc. And so it doesn't have to be really long or anything like that. You just want to make sure that you have it for your own sake, for when you look back at the videos and decide what clips you want to put in. And it also serves as evidence of student learning. So that works both ways.
Okay. And does it matter what part of the EdTPA where we put it? Do we need to put it behind the lesson plan?
No, you're gonna put it in the third task, an assessment. And we're gonna talk about that later in the week.
Okay.
Either this week or not this week. We're gonna talk about it next week.
Okay.
In one of our meetings next week, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Was this helpful at all?
The presentation, yes, it was.
Okay. I don't want to go over stuff that you generally already knew, but this kind of organizes it for you.
Yes, it did.
Let's see. Tracy, how are you?
I'm fine, and yourself?
I'm okay. I don't know that I heard from you yet. So, Jennifer? Anything?
You did. I just asked.
Yes, you did. Jennifer, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions right now. Sorry, I've got a 3-year-old meltdown over here, so I'm trying to keep.
Oh, listen, I have 5 grandchildren, so I know the feeling.
I do have one question I would like to ask.
Sure.
This school year, I was teaching MID, and I'm actually in the state of Georgia. They had the unique learning system. And I don't know if I'm going to actually be with that group when I do my student teaching because they haven't been assigned yet. But the question that I have is, when I come up with my lessons, can I reflect it around what they're doing too, or I need to come up with my own ideas? Because I know they do have their own lessons that they present to the students.
Okay, that's a very good question. And the answer is you can work with their lesson plan. However, you cannot submit their lesson plan.
Right.
You need to write out your own lesson plan. And I would, if I were you, I would add some elements of your own ideas to it. When you do your commentary, at the end, you need to make sure that you cite where you got the lesson plans from. That goes for materials too.
Okay.
If you take materials off, teacher, pay teacher, or whatever website, you need to cite those materials if you did not create them.
Okay.
So that's what you would need to do. But do not turn in a pre-made lesson plan to EdTPA because they'll throw it right back at you.
Okay.
I do have a quick question, sorry.
Okay.
When we are doing like our video of our kid, I know because I'm a co-teacher right now for social studies. So a lot of times I will go ahead and differentiate for my group of kids. If I'm teaching the lesson, can I teach those kids but kind of focus on one kid?
Yes, you should only have one focus student. Now,
Okay.
if you're going to teach a whole class full of kids, then you may need to blank out their faces or whatever. You may need to have permission.
Okay.
My suggestion would be that you try and isolate that student for the week of EdTPA. Remember, you're only filming for 1 week out of the the 15 weeks that you're going to be doing this. So you may want to see if you can work with someone separately for that time period.
I guess in my case, I would have to pull them to another classroom because the other teacher will be doing a lesson plan during that time, or is it okay to put them in the corner?
You can pull them into another classroom.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, this is Tracy. The lesson plans that we make, we just do these we just do the lesson plans for the one focus student.
Yes.
Okay.
Now it should be based on the same curriculum that's being used in the class, but you would just be teaching your one focus student. Now, if you have a group, you have 3 or 4 kids, then you can do that, but you would only use the work and the assessments for the focus student.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Very good. I believe we have one more session tomorrow night this week, and then I'll give you the weekend off.
Okay. Sounds great.
And tomorrow I will put this up where you saw today's in a new form I created this morning called Zoom meeting recordings. And so that'll be up tomorrow morning.
Okay.
It has to convert overnight.
Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
And I will see you probably tomorrow night.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.